Today I want to share with you my story and how I came to be an animator. It's a bit of a long story, and today I'd like to share that with you. Firstly, welcome back to my animation channel. Thanks very much for joining me. My name is James Whitelaw, as you know, and this will be a brief story of how I got to be in front of you on YouTube. So first of all, I was born in a place called Zimbabwe, which is, I'm in South Africa now, and Zimbabwe is just to the north. My father was a policeman, my mother was a teacher, I was a mediocre student, but I knew very early on that I could draw. I could do two things. I could draw and I could swim, and those were my two strengths. I was pretty useless at everything else. So I, from when I was a young kid, I was always drawing. I grew up with Tintin and Asterix and Obelix comics, and I was drawn actually more to the Tintin. I loved every time somebody would buy me a Tintin for a birthday or for Christmas. I can remember receiving every one of those, and I still have them. And that was a long time ago. That was 45, almost 50 years ago. I'm in my mid-50s now. So growing up, I knew that I was creative. I actually wanted to be another Hergé, the guy who authored and drew Tintin. That's what I wanted to do when I was a kid. Obviously, I wanted to do everything else that a kid wanted to do in those days, be a fireman, I remember, and be a pilot. I wanted to be a pilot until I was into my teens, actually. Be an astronaut, all these crazy things you want to do when you're a kid. But the one thing, the one strength that I kept going back to was I was able to draw and swim. But those were the two places that I really excelled. So when a school project would come up, I was the guy. If we were doing a project in a team, I was the guy who had to draw everything. I remember drawing lots of animals and lots of stuff. So that was me growing up. And then when I was probably 7 or 8, I remember, understand this is in the late 70s that I'm talking about. So everything was different. The TV was new, and we would watch cartoons, and I just remember thinking, wow, that's amazing. Cartoons. It wasn't Disney, it was Warner Brothers and all those crazy cartoons that were around at the time. And I started making them myself. And how I would do that was I would get a shoebox, and I'd cut two slits in it. So say a box like this, a bigger box, maybe more like this, a shoebox, a bit higher, and then I'd cut two slits in it here, and then I'd put everything's changed, but you used to get these when you went to the shops and there was a teller ringing up your groceries or your bill. It would all be printed out on this long ribbon of paper. Okay, some places they still do that, but I would get my mother to buy some of these rolls, and they were big, thick rolls like this. I don't know, 100 meters worth of paper, and I'd put spools in here. So I'd have the roll in here would go through the slit to the outside, back in the slit, and I'd make a handle here, and I'd put a torch in the back here and cut between the slits, cut a little viewer out here. And so I would draw on these paper on the rolls of paper, and I'd make animations. I was 8 years old, and my cousins and all my friends would come around on a Friday night, whatever. We'd turn the lights out. I'd put this thing, turn the torch on, put this thing in, and show them a little movie, and they loved it, and I loved doing that. So that's how it was back then. Very low tech. Was a different time. So that's that's what I was doing in my early years in my junior school, 7, 8, even 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, kind of that age. And then when I got into my early teens, around about 11, 12, my grandmother had I think it was a 16 mil camera, one of those things you actually had to you had to wind the reel. I can't believe how old this stuff is compared to I'm shooting this on an iPhone. It's just crazy to think back how things were and how easy the stuff is now. But I would shoot movies on this 16 mil. I think it was a 16 mil, and then I would edit them. And editing them, and I was 12 years old. Editing them would be a physical thing. You'd take the you'd shoot. You'd hope that you had this thing at the right speed, otherwise everything was sped up or slowed down, and then you'd send this off to the chemist, and it'd get developed. You'd wait a week, sometimes longer, depending where they had to send it to. You'd get it back, and you'd put it on a projector, home projector, and you'd have a look at it. And this is what I was doing when I was about 12. And I learned how to edit. My grandmother, a very creative woman, she had a editing suite. I wish I'd kept this stuff, but it had a small screen, and you would loop the film through, and you'd wind it on, and you'd watch it, and you'd clip it, and you had glue, and you'd overlap it, and you'd fascinating. So I was editing at the age of 12. Computers were were only to be seen another 10 years later, or 5 years later, or whatever the Macs first came out. This is a Mac here. So this was very low tech stuff, but I was doing it anyway because I really loved it. So the other thing that I was doing is because I was so obsessed with Tintin, I was creating my own albums of cartoons, of comic books like Tintin. It was called The Adventures of James, surprise, instead of The Adventures of Tintin. And I was doing that as well. And that's probably also at the age of 8, 9. So between those two things, I definitely knew this is what I wanted to do.